Despite the unshakable conviction with which textbooks proclaim the Great Pyramid to be a tomb, the silence inside its stone heart speaks otherwise. Imagine standing in the king's chamber. The walls are made of smooth red granite, massive blocks quarried far to the south in Aswan and hauled hundreds of kilometers upstream along the Nile. The chamber is completely bare. No carvings, no inscriptions, no paint, no offerings. Not even the faintest sign of ownership or intent. In the center of the chamber rests a solitary stone box. It's been labeled a sarcophagus, but there's a problem. It doesn't conform to any known burial practice of the time. It bears no markings, contains no human remains, and was too large to have been moved in or out through the chamber's narrow passages. That one detail alone suggests the box was placed inside before the pyramid was completed, meaning the builders must have constructed the room around it. This flips the entire narrative. It implies advanced planning, precision, and a strict architectural sequence. Not the chaotic improvisation we might expect from Bronze Age engineers. Where are the records? Let's pause to consider something equally perplexing. Ancient Egyptians were obsessive record keepers. We have documents detailing crop yields, fish hauls, court decisions, medical prescriptions, religious rites, and daily purchases from market stalls. We have love letters, family disputes, contracts, and inventories of royal sandals. And yet, for the construction of the greatest stone monument ever built, the silence is thunderous. There is no diary of the architect, no logbook from the foreman, no tribute carved into the stones, no grand inscription praising Khufu's accomplishment. Nothing. Just a few hastily painted red cartouches in a sealed chamber discovered under suspicious circumstances centuries later. It's as if someone wanted us to think the pyramid was Khufu's, but they couldn't quite replicate what authentic Egyptian tombs actually look like. The architectural enigma. Let's take a moment to appreciate just how non-Egyptian the pyramid truly is. Traditional Egyptian architecture, temples, tombs, and palaces, is elaborately decorated. Every available surface is a canvas for storytelling. Gods, rituals, pharaohs, myth, astronomy, family lines, moral law. The more sacred the site, the more adorned it becomes. Yet the pyramid is entirely void of such narrative art. It's almost clinical. Its design is equally baffling. The internal passageways rise and fall, twist and narrow, leading to chambers that appear symbolic but serve no practical funerary purpose. The so-called Queen's Chamber has no evidence of any queen. The subterranean chamber, carved into the bedrock itself, is unfinished, its floor littered with rough cuts, as if it were abandoned mid-project. Then there's the Grand Gallery, a vast ascending corridor with a roof nearly 30 feet high, corbelled in 7 layers of precisely placed stone. Its function is completely unknown. It leads to the king's chamber, yes, but not in a straight line. Why build such an immense passageway merely to transition between rooms? The architectural choices aren't just unnecessary for a tomb, they're illogical unless they had some other, more complex purpose. Working in darkness. Let's think practically for a moment. How did workers illuminate these deep interior spaces as they carved, shaped, and fitted massive stone blocks? The official answer is torches or oil lamps. But this creates a problem. Open flame leaves behind soot, carbon deposits, and smoke staining, especially in enclosed spaces with little airflow. And yet, inspections of the pyramid's corridors and chambers reveal no traces of smoke on the ceilings or walls. None. No black streaks, no charring, no oil residue, nothing. This singular absence leads to one of two possibilities. Workers had a cleaning system so advanced it erased all trace of fire, unlikely, or they used a different form of lighting altogether. Some have proposed that highly polished copper mirrors reflected sunlight deep into the pyramid, but any experiment attempting this method has failed past a few turns. The deeper one goes, the more light is lost. The pyramid's angles and long shafts make such a system incredibly inefficient. Others speculate about chemical lamps, or even electricity, an idea often dismissed, but not because of evidence, simply because it's impossible by modern assumptions. But then again, so is the pyramid itself, the gatekeeper of antiquity. Any serious discussion of Egypt's ancient monuments inevitably encounters one name again and again: Dr. Zahi Hawass. Often seen in documentaries and press events wearing his iconic fedora, Hawass is arguably the most famous Egyptologist in the world, and certainly the most powerful. For decades, he held sway over the Supreme Council of Antiquities, Egypt's highest authority on archaeological research. Through this role, he wielded unprecedented control over what could be excavated, filmed, published, or even discussed. Supporters hail him as a protector of Egypt's cultural heritage, a man who has dedicated his life to defending national pride against historical revisionism and exploitation. But to many independent researchers, he is seen quite differently: a gatekeeper, one who filters truth through the lens of political image, academic orthodoxy, and personal authority. Hawass has been repeatedly accused of blocking research that challenges the traditional narrative, especially investigations into the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, and other megalithic sites that suggest a deeper, older origin than accepted history allows. This is not theoretical. There are documented cases of independent teams being denied permits to explore anomalies near the Sphinx, filming projects cancelled without explanation, research into controversial topics, like the so-called Hall of Records, being shut down mid-effort, foreign scientists being discredited or expelled from Egypt after presenting unapproved theories. When asked about such actions, Hawass often dismisses dissent as pseudoscience. But not all of his critics are fringe YouTubers or self-proclaimed mystics. Some are geologists, architects, physicists, and engineers with decades of professional experience. What unites them is not a belief in aliens or Atlanteans, but a deep unease with how the evidence is being controlled. Science or storytelling? A growing number of experts have pointed out that the tools of archaeology, excavation, dating, analysis, are not immune to bias. Like any science, archaeology is filtered through interpretation, but unlike physics or chemistry, its conclusions often depend on narrative as much as data. In other words, archaeology isn't just about what is found. It's about what that discovery means and who gets to say so. When a cartouche is discovered in a pyramid shaft, for example, it's not just a mark on a wall. It becomes evidence, and from it emerges a story. Khufu built this pyramid. That story is then reinforced in textbooks, museums, tourism marketing, and national pride. But what happens when new data contradicts that story? If you're an academic who spent your career defending a specific theory, it becomes incredibly difficult to accept evidence that undermines your work. There's a natural resistance, a psychological barrier reinforced by professional reputation and institutional inertia. And so, controversial discoveries are often minimized, reinterpreted, or ignored entirely. Funding is cut. Access is revoked. Researchers are sidelined. And slowly, a subtle kind of censorship sets in, not by governments, but by the guardians of orthodoxy. The culture of avoidance. Many scholars know there are unanswered questions surrounding Egypt's ancient monuments. In private, they may even admit curiosity about the unorthodox possibilities, earlier civilizations, forgotten knowledge, unexplained precision. But in public, few are willing to speak openly. Why? Because academic careers are built on safe consensus. Young researchers are advised not to rock the boat. Grants go to conventional projects. Papers that question the timeline of civilization rarely survive peer review. The result is a field where the boundaries of acceptable inquiry are tightly patrolled. This culture of intellectual avoidance has created a strange paradox. The more provocative the evidence, the less likely it is to be explored. In a discipline that should reward curiosity, many are punished for asking the wrong questions. What's being hidden? When we step back and look at the full picture, certain patterns emerge. We see not just isolated anomalies, but a system-wide reluctance to acknowledge them. Among the most glaring questions: why are there sealed doors and chambers inside the pyramid that have never been opened? Why was access to those areas suddenly shut down just as breakthroughs were imminent? Why does the pyramid contain air shafts that point directly at major constellations, yet serve no ventilation purpose? Why do the mathematical constants encoded in the pyramid's base and height seem to reflect advanced knowledge of pi, phi, and Earth's curvature? Each of these facts, taken alone, might be explained away, but together they form a pattern of precision, planning, and purpose that goes far beyond the capabilities of a Bronze Age society still developing basic metallurgy. What we see is not just an architectural marvel. We see intent, we see knowledge, we see deliberate encoding, as though the builders were embedding information into stone, meant to last not just centuries but ages. Fear of the implications. But why would anyone want to hide that? Because if the pyramid is not just a tomb, if it was not built by Khufu in 2550 BCE, if it was instead the product of a forgotten civilization with technological and mathematical knowledge we do not yet understand, then the timeline of human history must be rewritten, and that rewrite would shake not just Egyptology, but history, anthropology, geology, engineering, theology, and even the philosophy of civilization itself. It would raise new questions no one is prepared to answer. Who were these people? Where did they go? What else did they know? And most importantly, why were they trying to send us a message through stone? That is the question at the heart of this mystery. And perhaps it's the question that some in power would rather we never ask. When ancient wonders conceal their secrets, it's not always in hidden vaults or buried relics. Sometimes it's in plain sight, glaring anomalies that contradict the very explanations we've been taught to accept. Nowhere is this clearer than in the narrow shafts and sealed chambers of the Great Pyramid. Often overlooked in favor of its more iconic exterior, the pyramid's interior tells a story that's far stranger, far more technical, and far more deliberate than anyone suspected. In the early 1990s, a German engineer named Rudolf Gantenbrink began to investigate one of these strange internal details: the narrow tunnels that branch off from the so-called Queen's Chamber. Egyptologists had long claimed these shafts were symbolic, useless, non-functional, spiritual metaphors rather than physical architecture. Some even suggested they were built for ventilation, despite the fact that the chambers are sealed. But Gantenbrink didn't settle for speculation. He brought a robot. The first door, the robot, called UPU-AU-2, was designed to explore the shaft's tight interior, only about 20 centimeters square and too narrow for any human. As the robot slowly advanced up the ascending tunnel, it revealed details no one expected: carefully smoothed inner walls, precisely carved joints, and an uncanny uniformity of dimension. Then it reached the end. Instead of finding a blank stone surface or an open continuation of the shaft, the robot came face to face with a perfectly fitted limestone door, complete with two small copper handles embedded in its surface. Copper. In a place where no other metal hardware exists. In a tunnel supposedly symbolic. On a door that supposedly leads nowhere. The implications were enormous. This wasn't random architecture. This was precision engineering. The copper handles weren't ornamental, they were mechanical. This wasn't the end of a symbolic shaft. It was the entrance to something. But just as Gantenbrink and his team prepared to expand the investigation and perhaps open the door, they were stopped. The Egyptian Antiquities Authority revoked access. The robot was removed. The investigation was shut down. No explanation was given. A decade of silence. For 10 long years, no one was allowed to revisit what became known as Gantenbrink's door. Speculation flourished. Was it hiding a chamber? A cache of texts? A passage to a deeper level of the pyramid? Finally, in 2002, a new team, sponsored by National Geographic, was granted limited access. They inserted a new camera and drilled a tiny hole through the limestone slab to peer into what lay behind. The world held its breath. What they found was another limestone block, smooth, solid, perfectly fitted. Another door, and behind that, no one knows, because the second door has never been breached. Despite global fascination, despite offers of funding, despite intense scientific curiosity, no further exploration has been allowed. The passage remains sealed, and so do the questions. What could be behind it? There are a few things that make this situation deeply suspicious. No ventilation or functional purpose. The shaft is sealed at both ends. It's not for air, not for drainage. And if it's symbolic, why end it with two copper-handled doors? Extraordinary precision. The alignment, the materials, and the construction suggest forethought, not improvisation. This is architecture designed to protect something. Repeated denial of access. Egyptian authorities have consistently rejected further drilling, citing preservation, despite the fact that non-invasive methods are available. Some theorists believe the shaft leads to a sealed repository of ancient knowledge, perhaps a chamber untouched since the pyramid was first sealed. Others suspect it may lead downward, into parts of the monument never mapped or excavated. A few even suggest it was built to preserve advanced technological artifacts, possibly related to energy systems or lost engineering. Far-fetched, maybe, but so is the pyramid itself. Moons and the hidden void. The idea that the Great Pyramid might still hold unknown chambers was considered fringe, until science proved otherwise. In 2017, a team of researchers used a revolutionary scanning technique known as muon tomography. This method tracks the interaction of cosmic particles, muons, as they pass through stone. By measuring how the particles slow down, scientists can see voids and hollows deep within solid structures. When they scanned the pyramid, what they found was extraordinary. Above the Grand Gallery, in a location previously assumed to be solid stone, they discovered a massive empty space, one nearly the size of the King's Chamber. It was dubbed the Big Void. This void is not connected to any known corridor. It has no documented entrance. It appears to be completely sealed and entirely unaccounted for by existing blueprints. It is, without question, a major archaeological discovery, and yet nothing was done. The 2017 Muon scan was not a rumor. It was a published, peer-reviewed scientific discovery, reported in top journals like Nature, confirmed by multiple independent research teams from Japan and France. These weren't fringe theorists or YouTube personalities. These were particle physicists and archaeologists working with high-grade equipment and rigorous protocols. And what did they find? An enormous space, completely undetected before. Not a crack, not a fissure. A deliberate chamber, larger than any room within the known internal architecture. Its presence directly above the Grand Gallery raises unsettling questions. If we believe the conventional narrative, every element of the pyramid had purpose. The king's chamber for the pharaoh's body, the queen's chamber as a symbolic resting place, the Grand Gallery as a procession route, the subterranean chamber an abandoned prototype. So what is this big void for? No inscriptions reference it, no ancient writings mention it, no visible passage leads to it. Yet it's there. Real, measurable, and massive. And yet, no one seems eager to explore it. What could be inside? Imagine for a moment that you're not bound by modern academic rigidity. Imagine you're simply trying to follow the evidence. What are the possibilities? A forgotten burial chamber? Unlikely. There's no evidence that any part of the pyramid ever contained a body. Not even the king's chamber, which lacks ceiling, artifacts, or funerary decoration. An internal weight-relieving structure? That's been proposed, but the shape and position of the void don't match the existing architectural systems used for weight dispersal, like the granite relieving chambers above the king's chamber. A hidden storage vault. Now we're closer. But if so, what was so important that it required being buried inside a structure designed to survive millennia? Theories range from sacred relics to scrolls, from knowledge tablets to technologies we can't comprehend. Some even suggest this chamber, and others like it, could contain elements not meant to be accessed until a certain time, or by a certain type of civilization. Not because of myth, but because of design. Whatever the truth, the refusal to investigate further suggests something more than scientific caution. It suggests deliberate delay, or worse, suppression. Doors, chambers, and the invisible hand. We now have a sealed shaft ending in a double-layered barrier with copper handles. a massive hidden void that no current maps or models account for. No attempts to explore, either using even the most non-invasive modern tools. This pattern is not due to lack of technology. We have micro-robots, we have fiber optic probes, we have ground-penetrating radar, muon detectors, and mini drones. It would take a single small borehole in the right place to unlock information that might rewrite everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. So why hasn't that been done? According to Egyptian officials, any additional drilling is too dangerous. It might compromise the structure. Yet exploratory boreholes have been drilled before, many times, without damage. Others claim such investigations would violate the sanctity of the pyramid. A noble sentiment, until you remember that the pyramid has already been looted, tunneled into, and stripped repeatedly throughout history. The deeper truth might be that those in power, both within Egypt and the academic institutions that partner with it, fear the implications of what might be found. A pattern beyond Egypt. These sealed spaces aren't unique to the Great Pyramid. Similar mysteries echo across other ancient sites. At Teotihuacan in Mexico, underground tunnels filled with mercury were discovered beneath the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent, only after years of denial that such spaces even existed. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, hundreds of buried stone pillars remain unexcavated under layers of soil that researchers are forbidden to disturb. In China, the massive Maoling Pyramid, larger than Giza in volume, is almost completely off-limits to foreign archaeologists, despite remote sensing suggesting internal cavities. In all of these places, one theme repeats. What lies beneath is carefully, intentionally hidden, not just by time or nature, but by people. And Egypt may be the crown jewel of this silence. More than stone. If the pyramid were only an architectural mystery, it might be dismissed as an anomaly. But there's something deeper, something encoded in its proportions, materials, and alignments that points to knowledge far beyond its supposed era. Its base perimeter divided by twice its height equals psi, to a remarkable degree of accuracy. The internal angles reflect the golden ratio, a constant found throughout nature, from seashells to galaxies. The monument is oriented to true north, with an error of only 3/60th of a degree, better than most modern buildings. It sits at the geographical center of Earth's landmass, when measured by latitude and longitude. The weight of the pyramid, multiplied by 10⁻⁵, equals approximately the mass of the Earth. Coincidences? Possibly. But when piled together, geometry, location, orientation, and proportions, they begin to form a pattern, not of primitive construction, but of scientific intent. It's as if the pyramid was not just a monument, but a mathematical message, encoded in stone, built to last through floods, wars, earthquakes, and the rise and fall of empires. A message we're only beginning to decode. Inside the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid lie clues not written in hieroglyphs, but etched into stone itself. The granite blocks that make up this chamber are among the hardest materials used anywhere in the ancient world. Sourced from the quarries of Aswan, they had to be transported over 500 miles to Giza, likely by river, though no one knows exactly how this was accomplished. Each block weighs up to 70 tons. That's equivalent to a fully loaded semi-truck. There are over 300 of these massive slabs in the chamber and its surrounding relieving structures. The question is not just how the ancient builders moved them, but how they shaped and fit them with such perfection. Some seams are so tight that even a razor blade cannot pass between the blocks. The internal dimensions are mathematically precise, the floor perfectly level. Traditional Egyptology suggests copper chisels and dolerite pounding stones were used for shaping granite. But if you ask a modern stonemason or a mechanical engineer, they'll tell you plainly that's impossible. Granite is so hard that even with modern tungsten carbide tools, shaping it with precision is difficult, slow, and tool-intensive. Copper is far too soft to cut it efficiently, let alone smoothly polish it or create uniform angles. And yet, inside the king's chamber and throughout other megalithic Egyptian sites, we see tool marks that suggest rotary cutting, tubular drilling, and even sawing, not pounding or chipping. The machinery evidence. Engineer Christopher Dunn, one of the leading voices in investigating ancient machining techniques, has conducted extensive analysis of the granite artifacts inside the Great Pyramid. He found helical striations, spiral grooves, on core drill holes that are typically associated with modern drill bits under high-pressure rotation. These marks suggest consistency in pressure, rotational speed that exceeds human effort, tools harder than the stone being cut. In one experiment, Dunn examined a core sample taken in the 19th century and determined the groove pitch, the spacing between spiral lines, indicated a level of efficiency unknown to simple hand tools. He concluded that the rate of material removal far exceeded what copper chisels or stone tools could achieve, by orders of magnitude. If true, this implies the use of some form of mechanical drilling apparatus, powered by energy and precision that we still don't associate with ancient societies. Dunn isn't alone in this. Other professionals in materials science, manufacturing, and mechanical engineering have expressed similar doubts. Many argue that the workmanship visible in ancient granite structures would require machine shops to reproduce, even today. And yet, the mainstream answer remains unchanged. Copper tools, elbow grease, and genius intuition. The Serapeum, precision in the dark. To understand the full implications of these anomalies, we need to step briefly outside the Great Pyramid, down into the underground crypts of Saqqara, where an even more mystifying mystery waits. Beneath the ancient Serapeum, carved into bedrock tunnels, lie more than 20 colossal granite boxes, each weighing between 60 and 100 tons, including their lids. These boxes were supposedly used as sarcophagi for sacred bulls during Egypt's Ptolemaic period. But here's the problem. The level of craftsmanship is staggering. The internal corners are perfect right angles. The walls are perfectly flat and polished, reflecting light like a mirror. The lids fit so perfectly onto the bases that they create airtight seals, without hinges, locks, or visible fastenings. Tool marks inside the boxes suggest a horizontal cutting tool, not pounding stones or chisels. And yet no tools capable of this work have been found. No inscriptions tell us who made the boxes. There are no hieroglyphs, no decorative elements, no religious texts, just silence, geometry, and precision. Even with modern diamond-tipped machinery, replicating one of these boxes would be a costly, laborious effort, requiring computer-controlled lathes, abrasives, and a high level of craftsmanship. And we're expected to believe Bronze Age workers accomplished this in candlelight, underground, with hammerstones. Again, we see the same pattern: unfathomable effort, zero documentation, complete deviation from other known practices, lighting without flame. Let's revisit an earlier point that takes on new meaning in light of all this. If these projects were truly carried out deep underground, how did workers see? We've already established that there's no soot, no burn residue, and no evidence of torches or oil lamps used within the pyramid or the Serapeum. Some have suggested reflective mirror systems, but those require direct sunlight and rapidly lose brightness with each reflection. Even under optimal conditions, you can't light a 100-meter shaft with mirrors. The light intensity would be negligible after just a few bends. So what alternatives are left? Some researchers have proposed that the ancients may have used chemical lighting, such as burning lime or phosphorescent compounds. Others go further, pointing to possible uses of electrochemical devices, like the so-called Baghdad battery found in Iraq, an ancient jar possibly used to generate small electric currents. While there's no direct evidence of electrical systems in the pyramid, the absence of fire marks is an open wound in the conventional narrative. And given that the precision work inside the pyramid requires visibility, not acknowledging this contradiction becomes an act of willful ignorance. All roads lead back to the question. We are left again with the central dilemma: how did they do it? The Great Pyramid, the Serapeum, the granite obelisks, the temple walls, and the sarcophagus boxes all share one thing in common. They reflect a level of technical execution far beyond what is logically available in the historical context in which they're placed. Mainstream scholars brush this aside by labeling these anomalies as ritual exaggeration, symbolic design, cultural expression, but stone doesn't lie. Geometry doesn't care about cultural symbolism. Machined surfaces are not metaphors. What we are seeing is technology, not mystery, engineering, not imagination, and it leads to one of two possibilities. Our dating is wrong. These structures are far older than we think and were built by a culture whose history has been lost. Our understanding of ancient Egypt is incomplete. They possess technologies and techniques we've yet to rediscover, or were gifted knowledge from an earlier, now vanished civilization. Neither answer is comfortable, but both are more plausible than the idea that a pre-industrial society, lacking iron tools, cranes, or wheels, could produce structures that challenge even our modern capabilities. For decades, the Great Pyramid has been labeled a tomb, a gigantic, over-engineered, overly precise tomb with no body, no grave goods, no inscriptions, and no decoration, completely unlike any other in Egypt. This label has been repeated so often that few even question it anymore. But a growing number of researchers, scientists, and engineers are asking a different question altogether. What if the pyramid wasn't a tomb at all? What if it served a completely different purpose? One rooted not in religion, but in science. To ask that question seriously, we have to start by treating the pyramid not just as a symbolic structure, but as a machine. One whose dimensions, layout, and materials weren't chosen for aesthetics or tradition, but for function. Engineering beyond its time. If we look at the pyramid purely as an object of engineering, a strange pattern emerges. Its shape, 4 triangular faces rising to a point, forms a perfect square-based pyramid, one of the most stable geometries in nature. Its corners are aligned with extreme precision to the cardinal directions: north, south, east, west. The base length divided by twice the height approximates pi, with over 99% accuracy. The pyramid's height to its base ratio also approximates the golden ratio, a number found throughout biology, art, and natural harmony. The diagonal length of its base equals the average length of a degree of latitude at the equator. These are not random coincidences. Each of these ratios can be found across sacred geometry, acoustic resonance, wave harmonics, and electromagnetic design. Together, they suggest intentional encoding of mathematical constants. The implication: whoever designed this monument had extraordinary knowledge of geometry, geography, and planetary measurement. Knowledge not supposed to exist in the Bronze Age. The pyramid's geographic perfection. The Great Pyramid isn't just mathematically perfect, it's geographically perfect. It sits on the Giza Plateau, not in the center of ancient Egyptian civilization, but at a far more remarkable point: the geographic center of all Earth's landmass. That is, if you were to balance all the continents on a scale, the pivot point would be within mere kilometers of the Great Pyramid. It aligns almost exactly with the average intersection of Earth's longitudinal and latitudinal land coverage. Coincidence? Maybe once. But combined with its precise alignment to true north, its location on a naturally elevated platform, and its position within a triadic layout of the Giza pyramids that reflects the stars of Orion's belt, it becomes harder to dismiss as accidental. It begins to feel purposeful, like the builders were choosing a global position with intent. But for what purpose? The pyramid as a power plant. In 1998, author and researcher Christopher Dunn released a radical proposal that the Great Pyramid was not a tomb, not a calendar, not a ceremonial monument, but a gigantic energy machine. In his book, The Giza Power Plant, Dunn argued that the pyramid was designed to function as a kind of harmonic resonator, capable of converting seismic vibrations from the Earth into usable energy through acoustic and electromagnetic resonance. Here's how the model works, in simplified terms. The descending passage channels vibrations from the Earth's crust into the subterranean chamber. These vibrations travel upward into the Grand Gallery, which, due to its size and shape, acts like a tuned acoustic chamber, amplifying specific frequencies. The King's Chamber, surrounded by 5 granite relieving chambers, acts like a resonant cavity, much like those found in musical instruments or laser optics. The granite itself, rich in quartz, has piezoelectric properties, meaning it can convert mechanical pressure into electrical charge. A chemical reaction, possibly involving materials introduced through the shafts, may have enhanced the ionization within the chamber. The result? A machine that gathered, amplified, and transformed vibrational energy, not unlike how we use turbines or piezoelectric transducers today. Evidence supporting the theory. While mainstream Egyptologists scoff at the idea, some compelling physical evidence lends weight to Dunn's hypothesis. Precision surfaces in the King's Chamber. The floor is level to fractions of a millimeter, far beyond the needs of a burial chamber. Granite composition. The granite blocks are rich in quartz and feldspar, both of which are known for their acoustic and piezoelectric properties. Resonance frequencies. Acoustic testing within the King's Chamber has revealed that the room amplifies certain frequencies, particularly those related to natural seismic vibrations. Burn marks and vitrification. In some cases, localized areas of discoloration or melting suggest extreme energy exposure, not from fire, but from something internal and directional. Electromagnetic anomalies. Multiple studies, including work by physicists from Russia and France, have documented strange EM behavior within the pyramid's interior. Unusual fields, distortions, and energy concentrations near the apex. None of this proves the pyramid was an energy generator, but it does make the tomb theory feel increasingly inadequate. The ancient Egyptians were not just master architects, they were obsessive skywatchers. Their temples, tombs, and monuments often reflect constellations, solstices, equinoxes, and planetary alignments. But nothing compares to the astronomical precision built into the pyramids of Giza. According to a theory first proposed by Robert Bauval in the 1990s, the layout of the three main pyramids, Khufu, the Great Pyramid, Khafra, and Menkaure, mirrors the three stars of Orion's belt, Al-Nitak, Al-Nilam, and Mintaka. The relative sizes of the pyramids reflect the relative brightness of these stars. Their spatial alignment on Earth perfectly matches Orion as it appeared in the night sky around 10,500 BCE. The pyramids are rotated slightly off a straight line, just like Orion's belt is tilted relative to the Milky Way. The Nile River even lines up with the Milky Way's position in the sky at the same epoch, symbolically linking the earthly and celestial rivers. This is not a vague resemblance. Bauval worked with star charts, archaeological surveys, and geodetic data to support the alignment. Independent astronomers have confirmed the accuracy, the implications. Either the pyramid builders were modeling a sacred celestial pattern, or they were preserving a memory from a time when the stars were in that position, which, again, dates back more than 12,000 years ago. That's twice as old as mainstream Egyptology allows. The Osiris connection. Why Orion? In Egyptian mythology, Orion was Osiris, the god of the dead, the underworld, rebirth, and cosmic order. His resurrection through the star Sirius and the alignment of the pyramids with his belt points to a cosmic resurrection theme embedded in stone. The soul of the pharaoh upon death was believed to ascend to Orion, joining the gods in the afterlife. But what if this was more than mythology? What if this was instruction, an encoded guide written in alignment and geometry, meant to teach us something about the structure of the cosmos, or perhaps the origin of civilization itself? To many researchers, the pyramid is not just a tomb or even a power device. It is a library, one that stores information not in words, but in ratios, alignments, harmonics, and star maps. The pyramid becomes not just a machine, but a message, a monument meant to last. Consider the materials used: limestone, granite, basalt. These are not only durable, they are resistant to erosion, earthquakes, time, and weather. Even after 4,500 years of wind, sand, and shifting earth, the Great Pyramid still stands with over 90% of its mass intact. It was built not to impress a contemporary audience, but to survive time itself. Unlike scrolls or clay tablets, the pyramid cannot be burned or washed away. It cannot be misinterpreted through translation. It speaks in universal constants: P, phi, mass, angle, position. Mathematics is the language of eternity. If a civilization wanted to pass on knowledge across great spans of time, even to humans who had lost the context to understand it, this is exactly how they might do it. And maybe they did. The Pyramid Code. In recent years, researchers have attempted to decode the mathematical and structural elements of the pyramid, interpreting it as a repository of scientific data. Some of the proposed embedded information includes the circumference of the Earth, calculated from the pyramid's base and scale, the distance between Earth and the Sun encoded in proportions, the length of the solar year, accurate to within minutes, references to precession of the equinoxes, a slow wobble in Earth's rotation that takes 26,000 years to complete, ratios that point to the speed of light, the mass of the Earth, and even the gravitational constant. Skeptical scholars argue that some of these values are retrofitted, projected onto the pyramid after the fact. But others contend that the precision of the numbers, the consistency across unrelated measurements, and the layered complexity point to deliberate encoding. Think of it this way. If you buried an encrypted hard drive in a cave and left it for 10,000 years, you'd hope whoever finds it knows what a hard drive is. But what if they didn't? You'd have to encode your message in something more fundamental: geometry, physics, universal truths. That's what the pyramid may be, a time capsule of truth, built not for one culture or one king, but for any who would come later, armed with science, searching for answers. A global legacy. If the Great Pyramid is more than just a tomb, if it is a message, a machine, or even a marker left by a vanished culture, then surely it cannot stand alone. And it doesn't. All across the ancient world, we find structures that defy their time. In Peru, at sites like Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo, we find megalithic walls with polygonal blocks that fit together so tightly no mortar was needed, and no modern tool could match their complexity. In Lebanon, at the temple complex of Baalbek, sits the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, an enormous megalith estimated to weigh over 1,000 tons, cut, shaped, and moved before the invention of the wheel. In India, the Kailasa temple was carved top-down from a single mountain, a feat still unexplained even with today's equipment. In Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, dated to over 12,000 years ago, features 20-ton T-shaped pillars with animal reliefs that predate agriculture, writing, and pottery. Each of these sites, like the Great Pyramid, appears at the beginning of its respective culture, not at its end. As if civilization began not with primitive huts, but with impossible stonework. This pattern suggests something stunning. What we call the dawn of civilization may have actually been a restart, a recovery from a much older, forgotten age. The lost civilization hypothesis. The idea that a highly advanced global civilization existed prior to recorded history was once relegated to fringe speculation. But that is changing. Scholars like Graham Hancock, John Anthony West, and Randall Carlson have presented compelling evidence that Earth experienced a cataclysmic event, possibly a comet impact or solar outburst, around 12,800 years ago, at the onset of the Younger Dryas. This event could have wiped out coastal civilizations, triggered massive flooding, echoed in worldwide flood myths, and reset human progress for thousands of years. Those who survived, perhaps in highland sanctuaries like the Andes, the Himalayas, or the Nile Valley, may have preserved fragments of knowledge. They may have passed down building techniques, astronomical systems, and mathematical principles to emerging cultures. The result? A scattering of monuments built with ancient knowledge by people who inherited tools they couldn't recreate, and who worshipped the very beings who gave them the knowledge. Over time, the story became legend. The teachers became gods. The instructions became myth. And the monuments endured. Not just how, but why. When we consider the possibility that the Great Pyramid was not built by Khufu, but by or through an earlier forgotten people, the central question shifts. We no longer ask just how it was built, we ask why. Why encode astronomical data in its dimensions? Why build it to last tens of thousands of years? Why place it at Earth's geodetic center? Why align it to Orion? And why make access to its inner chambers so difficult, even by modern standards? Could it be that this structure was not meant to serve the dead, but to guide the living? Could it be that the pyramid was designed as a time-resistant beacon, waiting patiently for a future generation, one with the tools, science, and open-mindedness to rediscover its purpose? And if that generation is us, are we listening? What if we've missed the point? The real mystery of the Great Pyramid may not be its construction, but our inability to interpret it. We look for tombs. We look for names. We look for stories. But what if the pyramid is not telling a story, but demonstrating a principle? What if it's not a message in language, but in code? A code written in proportion, placement, resonance, and light. In that view, the pyramid becomes more than a monument. It becomes a mirror, one that reflects not just the past, but the minds of those who observe it. One that forces us to examine our own assumptions, our historical arrogance, and our belief that progress is always linear. A monument to what we forgot. There's a reason the pyramid captures the imagination. It is alien, not in origin, but in philosophy. It doesn't just challenge engineering, it challenges worldview. It reminds us that we are not the first to stand on this earth with knowledge, technology, and vision. It reminds us that memory can be lost, that the sands of time bury more than cities. They bury truth. And yet, the pyramid waits. Silently, patiently. Perhaps that's the greatest mystery of all. Not what it hides, but what it preserves. A record, a warning, a gift, left by a people we've forgotten, for a future they hoped would remember. Officially, he served as the Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, and later as Minister of Antiquities. But unofficially, he was something more. The final word on everything ancient in Egypt. Want to dig near the Sphinx? You need his signature. Want to film inside the pyramid? He decides. Want to publish a paper proposing a new theory? Better be ready for backlash. For his supporters, Hawass is a national hero, a man who protected Egypt's heritage from looters, sensationalists, and foreign exploitation. He's praised for boosting tourism and defending the cultural identity of the nation. But critics see a different figure, a gatekeeper, deeply invested in preserving a particular historical narrative, even when the evidence points elsewhere. The politics of permission. Most people assume science is democratic, but in archaeology, especially in Egypt, it's not. Access to excavation sites, permission to conduct research, even entry into certain chambers of the Great Pyramid, is controlled by a small group of officials. These permissions are often based not on merit or evidence, but on whether your conclusions support the accepted model. Numerous independent researchers, geologists, engineers, astronomers, have found themselves locked out of Egypt's most mysterious sites, not because their methods were flawed, but because their findings raised uncomfortable questions. Examples include denied access to the water erosion trenches around the Sphinx, cancelled robotic probes into unopened chambers within the pyramid, suppressed publication of scans showing subsurface anomalies beneath the Giza Plateau. Why the resistance? Because to accept these anomalies as valid would mean opening the door to alternative timelines, lost civilizations, or non-Egyptian origins. Ideas that challenge everything modern Egyptology has built itself upon. Reputation before revelation. Academic institutions, by their nature, tend to be conservative. They resist change, not because of malice, but because they're structured to protect existing knowledge, not destabilize it. Professors spend decades building their careers around certain interpretations. Entire departments, museums, and funding bodies are built atop the traditional narrative. To suddenly say, "we were wrong," threatens not only professional reputations, but budgets, exhibits, educational frameworks, and national identity. This creates a subtle but powerful pressure. It's safer to repeat what's already accepted than to ask risky questions. It's easier to dismiss anomalies as coincidence than to investigate them fully. It's more comfortable to brand a theory as pseudo-archaeology than to admit you have no explanation. As a result, truly revolutionary ideas rarely make it past the first peer review. Funding goes to safe, predictable projects. Conferences feature only mainstream topics, and the public only hears one version of the past. The cost of dissent. Those who do challenge the mainstream often pay a high price. Respected researchers like Robert Schoch, Graham Hancock, and Christopher Dunn have all faced academic blacklisting. Their work, though grounded in data, has been branded alternative, pseudo-scientific, or sensationalist. But why? Because they ask the wrong questions. What if the Sphinx is 12,000 years old? What if the pyramid wasn't a tomb? What if civilizations existed long before Mesopotamia? These aren't wild fantasies. They're hypotheses grounded in geology, engineering, and astronomical observation. But because they threaten the status quo, they are treated not with scientific scrutiny, but with institutional silence. Worse, some researchers are intentionally discredited, accused of fabrication, or have their access revoked. A few have been denied entry into Egypt altogether. That's not science, that's dogma, too big to fail. The accepted timeline of human history is not just a scholarly framework, it's a global foundation. It underpins our understanding of civilization's rise, humanity's development, the origins of religion, politics, and science. If you change the beginning of that timeline, the ripple effects would be seismic. Think about what's at stake. School curricula would need to be rewritten in nearly every country. National identities built on firsts, first writing, first cities, first calendars, could be undermined. Museums, tour industries, academic disciplines, and entire careers would be devalued. Religious narratives that depend on historical chronology could be challenged. In short, too many systems depend on the old version of history to allow room for a drastically new one. It's not about facts, it's about control, nationalism, and ownership of the past. Nowhere is this more sensitive than in Egypt. Modern Egypt sees itself as the inheritor and guardian of one of the world's most iconic ancient civilizations. The pyramids are not just archaeological sites. They're symbols of national pride, economic engines of tourism, and sources of international identity. To even suggest that the pyramids may predate the pharaohs, or that non-Egyptians may have built them, is considered cultural trespassing. Some officials have even called it historical racism. From that perspective, alternative theories are not seen as academic inquiries, but as threats to sovereignty. This has led to restrictions on foreign-led digs, media censorship of controversial documentaries, laws that ban the defamation of Egyptian heritage. The irony is that many of the researchers proposing alternative ideas are championing Egypt's deeper significance, not denying it. But in a world of fragile national narratives, anything that challenges the established story is viewed with hostility. The role of religion and belief. Let's be honest, our understanding of ancient history is deeply entwined with spiritual and religious beliefs. From biblical accounts of creation to Islamic and Christian views of ancient civilizations. If, for example, it were proven that an advanced civilization existed 12,000 years ago, long before the accepted age of Adam, Abraham, or Noah, many traditional faith-based timelines would be thrown into crisis. And because faith shapes politics, education, and culture, this potential disruption creates resistance from powerful institutions. It's easier to ridicule the messenger than to challenge the doctrine. Thus, many researchers who delve into ancient anomalies are accused of promoting New Age mysticism or anti-religious propaganda, even if their work is entirely data-driven. But science is not meant to comfort belief. It's meant to challenge assumption. Economics of obedience. It's no secret that grant money, university positions, and academic publications are tightly linked. To get funding, researchers must often propose safe conventional projects that support existing theories. Publishing a paper on solar alignments in Middle Kingdom tombs will earn you praise. Publishing one on muon-detected voids or non-royal pyramid origins might get you blacklisted. This creates a form of economic obedience. Young archaeologists are taught what not to say if they want tenure. Professors who speak too freely risk losing grants. Museums avoid controversial exhibitions to protect donors. And media producers are careful not to offend the narrative, lest they lose access to film permits. In such an environment, truth becomes market-driven, and markets hate uncertainty, fear of being wrong. But perhaps the most human reason the truth is resisted is this: no one likes being wrong. Admitting that we've misunderstood the past isn't just uncomfortable, it's existential. It means rethinking what it means to be human. It means acknowledging we may not be the pinnacle of progress. It means accepting that history is not linear, but cyclical. That we forget, then rediscover, again and again. Such a realization is humbling, terrifying even, but it also opens the door to something else, wonder. Because if we allow ourselves to question, if we admit that maybe, just maybe, we've missed something, then we allow ourselves to learn again. And that is where real history begins. The unraveling begins. For generations, the guardians of historical orthodoxy maintained a near-total grip on the public's understanding of the past. They shaped schoolbooks, dominated universities, curated museum exhibits, and appeared as unquestioned authorities in media. But the world has changed. In the last 2 decades, the rise of independent research, digital platforms, and global collaboration has given voice to an entirely new generation of thinkers. These aren't conspiracy theorists hiding in basements. They're engineers, astronomers, geologists, and linguists. Some with academic credentials, others with field experience, all united by one trait. They ask questions, and they don't wait for permission. When access to physical sites is denied, they use 3D modeling, satellite imaging, and muon tomography. When peer-reviewed journals block their papers, they publish open access or present to massive online audiences. When mainstream media ignores anomalies, they show the data directly to the public. The result? A growing segment of the population is no longer satisfied with the official story. The public is waking up. This awakening isn't coming from universities. It's coming from curiosity. Millions have watched documentaries and lectures by alternative historians. Books like Fingerprints of the Gods, The Giza Power Plant, and Magicians of the Gods have become international bestsellers. YouTube channels breaking down ancient engineering anomalies now rival mainstream history programs in viewership. Podcasts, conferences, and forums are buzzing with intelligent, grounded debate. People aren't just listening, they're thinking. They're seeing the contradictions for themselves. The pyramid is too perfect to be primitive. The timeline is too clean to be real. The story is too simple for such a complex world. And once you see the cracks, you can't unsee them. When the evidence refuses to go away. A curious thing about truth, it doesn't need to be defended, it just needs to survive. Despite decades of suppression, the evidence hasn't disappeared. It's still there. The precision-cut granite that copper tools can't replicate. The hidden voids mapped by cosmic rays. The geological water erosion on the Sphinx enclosure, pointing to an age before the Sahara was a desert. The megalithic quarries where tools are absent but outcomes are extraordinary. The mathematical constants encoded in the pyramid structure that speak a universal language. These facts are like persistent embers refusing to die out. And as more people encounter them, the old explanations begin to feel hollow. Truth doesn't need a permission slip. It only needs time. Rewriting the narrative. If we embrace what the evidence suggests, we must be willing to accept a new narrative. One more complex, more ancient, and more mysterious than the one we've inherited. A narrative where civilization is older than we thought. History is non-linear, with cycles of rise, fall, and rebirth. Ancient peoples may have understood the earth, sky, and stone in ways we've only begun to rediscover. The Great Pyramid is not an isolated miracle. but a survivor of a forgotten system of knowledge. That doesn't mean aliens built it. It doesn't require mysticism. It simply asks us to consider that we are not the first advanced culture, only the latest, the real risk. So why is the truth still so controversial? Because once accepted, it changes everything. It forces us to rethink the foundations of science, religion, identity, and progress. It humbles us. It reminds us that knowledge can be lost. That even we, with our satellites and smartphones, are vulnerable to forgetting. It calls us to responsibility, to preserve knowledge more carefully, to stay curious, to challenge consensus when it becomes stagnant, to remember that the pursuit of truth is never convenient, but always necessary. A new chapter begins. The walls of dogma are cracking. The pyramid still stands. The evidence still waits. The silence is fading. And now we must ask ourselves, if we are ready to admit we were wrong, what else might we finally see? Because the truth was never lost. It was simply buried under sand, stone, and story, waiting for us to return. A new age of discovery. In the past, exploration meant shovels, dust, and dynamite. But today, we can peer inside the earth without turning a single stone. A quiet revolution in archaeology is underway, fueled not by pickaxes, but by particle physics, radar, and imaging algorithms. These technologies are not science fiction. They are real, and they are being used right now to unlock secrets that have been buried for thousands of years. And nowhere is this more important or more controversial than at the Giza Plateau. Muon tomography, seeing the invisible. Let's start with one of the most powerful tools in modern non-invasive archaeology, muon tomography. Muons are subatomic particles created when cosmic rays strike the upper atmosphere. They constantly rain down on Earth and pass through solid objects like stone. But here's the trick. They slow down or scatter when they pass through denser material, and pass more easily through empty spaces. By placing muon detectors inside and around a structure, scientists can build a 3D map of what's solid and what isn't. In 2017, an international team of scientists used this technique on the Great Pyramid. What they found shocked the world. Above the Grand Gallery, where no internal space had ever been mapped before, they detected a massive void, at least 30 meters long, with a shape and scale similar to the King's Chamber. This wasn't a hairline crack or air pocket. It was a deliberate, massive space, completely sealed, completely unknown. It was called the Big Void. And then, silence. The Big Void, a chamber with no door. After the initial press release, curiosity exploded. What was this chamber? Why was it hidden? Could it contain something? But the excitement was short-lived. Egyptian authorities quickly moved to downplay the discovery, calling it not a room, not important, and not open for exploration. They refused to authorize any further scanning, drilling, or probing. Even the original researchers were asked to halt public commentary. This kind of behavior is unusual, especially for what should be a world historic find. Why the rush to dismiss it? Here's the pattern again. When evidence emerges that contradicts or complicates the established narrative, it is not welcomed, it is managed. But technology has no agenda. It simply shows us what's there. And what it shows is this. The pyramid is not fully mapped, not even close. Ground-penetrating radar, GPR, secrets below the sand. While muons look inside stone, another technology looks beneath it. Ground-penetrating radar, GPR. GPR sends electromagnetic pulses into the ground and records the echoes that bounce back. It's like sonar, but for soil and rock. It's used in forensic science, urban mapping, and increasingly in archaeology. In 1997, a team led by Thomas Dobecki and John Anthony West used GPR around the Sphinx enclosure. They found signs of deep fissures, hollow pockets, and unmapped tunnels beneath the structure. Similar work has detected subsurface anomalies under the Giza Plateau itself, right beneath the Great Pyramid. Again, rather than being excited, officials reacted with denial and restriction. Permits for further scanning were blocked. Data was buried. Follow-up investigations were shut down. The message was clear: you can dig, only if you don't find anything new. What lies beneath? For decades, rumors have circulated about underground chambers, tunnels, and even vaults beneath Giza. Some come from historical records. The ancient historian Herodotus wrote of a vast subterranean system beneath the pyramids. 9th century Arab chronicler al-Makrizi described a labyrinth of shafts and sealed halls. 19th century explorer Giovanni Caviglia claimed to have discovered a deep passage beneath the Sphinx. Others come from modern reports. In 1993, researchers using seismic soundings detected a chamber 12 meters beneath the Sphinx's pores. A team allegedly working under the Egyptian Antiquities Organization excavated a stairway under the Sphinx, but no official report was ever published. Satellite imaging experts have identified geometric formations beneath the sand that suggest buried structures, aligning precisely with the axis of the pyramids above. Yet none of these leads have been pursued, at least publicly. The Hall of Records, myth or memory? There is an ancient legend, whispered through millennia, echoed in esoteric texts, and passed down by mystics and initiates, that somewhere beneath the Giza Plateau lies a hidden library, a hall of records, built to preserve the knowledge of a world long forgotten. The most well-known account comes from the American clairvoyant Edgar Cayce, who in the early 20th century gave hundreds of trance readings in which he described a pre-Egyptian civilization, Atlantis, whose survivors fled to Egypt around 10,500 BCE. According to Cayce, these survivors constructed the Great Pyramid not as a tomb, but as a beacon and memory vault. He claimed that beneath the Sphinx, hidden in stone, is a chamber containing records of human history before the flood, writings in symbols older than hieroglyphs, knowledge of astronomy, healing, energy, and creation, maps of the world as it was before catastrophe struck. To Orthodox scholars, Cayce's visions are fantasy. But here's where it gets strange. Scientific findings, decades after Cayce's death, have uncovered anomalies beneath the Sphinx, in the exact places he described. Coincidence? Or confirmation? Under the Sphinx. The Sphinx is perhaps the most enigmatic monument in Egypt, if not the world. Older than the pyramids, according to some geologists, it stares silently eastward, as if guarding something unseen. Its massive pores rest atop a carefully leveled stone platform, and beneath that platform, That's where the mystery begins. In 1993, the Schroeder Seismic Study, funded by the Edgar Cayce Foundation and conducted in coordination with the Egyptian government, detected a rectangular cavity beneath the Sphinx's forepaws. A cavity with sharply defined edges. A man-made chamber. The study was real, the results were published. But access to the chamber? Denied. No excavation was allowed. No instruments were lowered in. The Egyptian authorities abruptly cut off all cooperation without explanation. Why? If the cavity is natural, prove it. If it's man-made, explore it. If it's nothing, what is there to hide? Ancient accounts, modern echoes. The idea of an underground chamber is not unique to modern mystics. Ancient historians and explorers spoke of it long before Cayce. Pliny the Elder wrote in the 1st century CE of a network of subterranean vaults near the pyramids, now sealed and forgotten. Strabo, the Greek geographer, described a hidden shaft leading into the belly of the earth near the Giza Plateau. Arab sources from the 10th to 13th centuries speak of a vast chamber beneath the Sphinx, reachable only through secret passages known only to the initiates of ancient schools. All of these accounts predate modern scanning and imaging, and yet they all point to the same thing. There's more beneath Giza than sand and stone, and modern technology is beginning to agree. The abyss of denial. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The evidence keeps surfacing, but official exploration refuses to follow. Why? One possibility. What lies below Giza doesn't fit. If the Hall of Records, or anything like it, were found, the implications would be cataclysmic for the current model of history. It would suggest a civilization existed thousands of years before Sumer or Egypt. This civilization had writing, architecture, and cosmology far beyond what we expect of Stone Age humans. Knowledge survived the last great catastrophe and was deliberately preserved for future generations. Such a discovery wouldn't just rewrite a few textbooks. It would rewrite the human story. And that may be the very reason it's being avoided. But the ground remembers. We like to think of the past as buried, but stone doesn't forget. And the earth keeps records of its own. If there is a Hall of Records, it is not a myth. It is a possibility and a test. A test of whether we are ready to face the truth of our origins. A test of whether we seek knowledge or comfort. Because eventually the sands will shift, the stone will speak, and what was hidden will return. The rise of unstoppable tools. For thousands of years, the secrets of the Great Pyramid and the Giza Plateau were hidden by time, stone, and silence. But now, the very tools we've created to explore space, cure disease, and model the cosmos are turning inward, toward the deep past, and they are revealing more than anyone expected. And here's the key difference. These tools don't need permission. Artificial intelligence can now reconstruct 3D models of ancient sites using only surface data. LiDAR and hyperspectral imaging can penetrate jungle, sand, and even some stone to reveal foundations and voids. Satellite mapping can detect subground geometries hidden to the naked eye. Mography continues to scan the pyramid in silence, particle by particle, with increasing resolution. The new generation of researchers doesn't wait for political approval or university grants. They use open-source data, crowdsourced analysis, and public science platforms to conduct investigations that would have been impossible just 20 years ago. We are, in essence, entering a time when history will no longer be what we're told, but what we can see. And the picture forming is not one of a tomb. It's something far older, far more complex, and far more advanced. The death of the gatekeeper model. In the past, only a few institutions had access to tools, knowledge, and communication networks. The public had no choice but to trust the authorities. But that era is ending. Independent researchers are publishing peer-reviewed data outside of universities. Decentralized communities are archiving and analyzing satellite imagery. Platforms like YouTube and Substack have become modern libraries of Alexandria, full of multidisciplinary knowledge, debate, and collaboration. Amateur investigators with technical backgrounds are asking smarter questions than career academics, trained not to challenge the system. As the tools become more accessible, truth becomes democratized. And the old gatekeepers, they're being bypassed, not out of rebellion, but out of irrelevance. Knowledge wants to be known. One of the most powerful ideas in science is that information seeks expression. Truth, like energy, doesn't disappear. It simply changes form, hidden in stone, echoing in myth, etched in architecture, or encoded in proportion. The Great Pyramid was built to last, but perhaps also to speak. Not through words, but through geometry, resonance, and mathematics. And today, for the first time in millennia, we finally possess the tools to listen. Maybe that's why the mystery persists. Maybe that's why the pyramid is so precise, so perfectly placed, so obsessively aligned. Because it wasn't built for the ancient priests or pharaohs. It was built for us. For a future civilization that would one day understand. What comes next? So what happens when we finally admit it? When we stop calling anomalies coincidence and start asking real questions? When we look beneath the pyramid and into ourselves, we begin the greatest project of all. Not just uncovering lost structures, but rediscovering lost wisdom. Not just updating history books, but changing how we think about humanity itself. Not just solving a mystery, but becoming worthy of the answers. Because if the Great Pyramid is a message across time, then what we do with it defines who we are. Will we hide the truth to protect a story? Or embrace it and begin writing a new one? Deep within the heart of the Great Pyramid, one encounters a problem that, at first glance, may seem trivial, but on closer inspection becomes one of the most baffling aspects of the entire structure: the question of illumination. To construct the intricate passageways, chambers, and shafts deep inside this megalithic monument, ancient builders would have needed a reliable and consistent source of light. The internal corridors of the pyramid are pitch black. No natural light reaches them, and torches or oil lamps seem like the obvious solution. Yet here lies the mystery. Despite thorough examinations, scientists have found no traces of soot or smoke residue on the ceilings or walls. In a structure built with such attention to detail, this absence is not just a small oversight, it's a glaring contradiction. In any enclosed space where open flames are used, carbon deposits accumulate over time. Yet the interior of the pyramid is pristine. So the question arises, how did they see what they were doing? One theory is that reflective surfaces, such as copper mirrors, were used to direct sunlight deep into the structure. But this model fails under scrutiny. Mirrors lose intensity with each reflection, and the winding geometry of the internal corridors makes it virtually impossible to channel light deeply and precisely. Not to mention, we've found no mirrors, no guiding infrastructure for such a system. and no indication that this was even attempted. So we are left with a possibility that makes many archaeologists uncomfortable. The builders may have possessed access to a different kind of light source. A clean, smokeless, possibly electrical or chemical illumination that left no soot, no flame, and no residue. This notion, while speculative, opens a floodgate of new questions. Could ancient Egyptians, or a predecessor civilization, have harnessed forms of energy that have since been lost to time? Supporters of this idea often point to strange artifacts like the so-called Dendera light bulbs, relief carvings found in the Hathor Temple at Dendera, which depict what some interpret as large filament-like bulbs with cables or serpents inside. While mainstream Egyptologists insist these are stylized lotus flowers with mythological meaning, others see the imagery as symbolic of ancient electric discharge devices. If this seems far-fetched, consider this. Ancient Baghdad produced the Baghdad Battery, ceramic jars with copper and iron components capable of producing small electrical charges. The knowledge of static electricity and simple circuits may have existed far earlier than assumed. So what if the builders of the pyramid weren't simply cutting stone in the dark? What if they were illuminating their work with a light we have yet to rediscover? The case of the Sphinx, equally mysterious and just as controversial, is the Great Sphinx of Giza, a monument whose origin story remains hotly contested. Carved from a single outcrop of limestone and measuring over 240 feet in length, the Sphinx has stood guard over the Giza Plateau for millennia. Mainstream Egyptology attributes its construction to Pharaoh Khafra around 2500 BCE, citing proximity to his pyramid and a few vague stylistic similarities. But the stone tells a different story. In the early 1990s, geologist Dr. Robert Schoch and independent researcher John Anthony West made a remarkable observation. The Sphinx's body shows signs of water erosion, not wind erosion. The weathering patterns, deep vertical fissures and undulating waves, match what one would expect from prolonged heavy rainfall, not the arid desert climate that has persisted in Egypt for the last 5,000 years. Schoch's geological dating suggests the monument's construction must have occurred at least 12,000 years ago, during the end of the last ice age, when the Sahara was still a lush green savanna, and rainfall was frequent. If this timeline is accurate, it predates dynastic Egypt by more than 7,000 years. This challenges everything we've been told about the birth of civilization. It suggests that the Sphinx was not built by the ancient Egyptians we know from history, but by an earlier, forgotten culture. A culture with the ability to carve massive monuments with astonishing precision. Some scholars suggest that the Sphinx was later recarved or restored by the Egyptians, explaining stylistic features that don't match the erosion timeline. This would be consistent with ancient traditions of inheritance and restoration of sacred sites. Even the head of the Sphinx appears disproportionately small for its body, suggesting it was reshaped, possibly from the likeness of a lion or earlier deity. And yet, despite the strength of this geological evidence, mainstream institutions remain resistant. No serious redating of the Sphinx is taught in university curriculums. No major Egyptologist has accepted the implications without pushback. The question becomes, why? Why the silence? The answer, as with many controversial ideas in archaeology, lies not in the data, but in the politics of knowledge. Admitting the Sphinx is older than we thought means admitting the existence of a pre-dynastic advanced civilization. It means revisiting every assumption about when complex societies, engineering, and sacred architecture began. This isn't just academic. It threatens careers. It threatens reputations. It threatens the national narrative of modern Egypt, which proudly ties its roots to the pharaohs, not to unknown builders lost to time. There is also fear. Fear that opening the door to one anomaly will unleash many others. If the Sphinx is older, what about the pyramids? If these monuments are inherited, who built them? And if they were built before known civilization, where did that knowledge come from? Alternative researchers believe that what lies beneath the Sphinx, and beneath Egypt's official story, is a buried legacy. Not just in terms of physical chambers, but in the form of suppressed understanding. From muon scans that detect hidden voids, to ancient texts describing underground halls, to cultural taboos surrounding excavation near the Sphinx's pores, there's a growing sense that something is being concealed. But even concealment can't stop curiosity forever. We are at a turning point. The tools of science, once used to reinforce orthodoxy, are now revealing inconsistencies the gatekeepers can no longer ignore. The truth doesn't vanish, it waits. Beneath sand, beneath dogma, beneath fear, and one day it will rise again.